there a problem? We're ready. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks for coming on this not quite so lovely Friday afternoon, but it's lovely in some ways because it's my pleasure to introduce to you, those of you who haven't met her and those of you who have, Jan Mahar, who is the awardee this year for the George McMurtry Teaching Award. This is our senior teaching award, and we always celebrate with a lecture and a gathering and a lecture, which is she's going to give in a minute. But first, a little bit about Jan. She's been with IST for quite some time. What was it, 1999, something like that, 2000? She came, and I think she was part of Career Services initially, but she could not resist. She loved to teach. Even back then, she was like, teaching. And so she was teaching things like first year seminar and so on, but gradually she recognized, and we recognized, that our best use of her would be as a senior lecturer. And so around about the mid-2000s, she became a senior lecturer and taught all different classes, was very, very successful teaching classes from 15 kids to 150 kids. She mastered the cybertorium in ways that are just amazing. And later on, in the last few years, she has gone on to become one of our first, in fact, she was our first, online-only instructor. And so I suspect that some of what she's going to talk about today is going to be looking across those two different ways of teaching. And what's nice about Jan is that she's also been very community service-oriented. And so when she went into the online teaching, she joined our sort of undergraduate advisory committee as a representative for the World Campus instruction concerns. And so she's been a voice for those things all along. So I can say, I could go on, because I've known Jan for many years, and I've worked with her on research. I've done so many things with Jan. But now I want to also shift and say that this award is in honor of this young man sitting up here at the front, George, and his lovely wife, Margaret, who come to us every year to celebrate the award. And George himself is an amazing example of an instructor for many lecture. I don't know what you were, but you were very involved in engineering, both as an educator, but then subsequently as an administrator, associate dean, this, that, and the other. You've done so many things. Faculty Senate, it's like, if it's Penn State, George has done it. And he's now, of course, retired. You probably figured that out. But he was also, importantly, one of the founders of this school. So he really helped get us off onto a solid kind of pedagogical trajectory, and he's continued to support us in this way, and this award that we give out every year is in recognition of the impact that he's had over the years and continues to have. But with that, back to Jan, who is going to talk about tailoring teaching behaviors to student learning style. Jan.
Now you're live. Now I'm live. Okay. She's been the wind beneath my wings. You know, as your mom always is. So it's great to be able to have her here as well. Other folks I'd like to thank are the IST family. I think that when I started 15 years ago, I think there were 10 faculty. And the first person I went to a new orientation, as all of you employed did, over at the Penn Stater, I believe, and had an orientation. It was my cousin, Jim Purdom, who was doing it. So he was standing up there and he said, "I want you to know," and he looked at every single new employee and said, "We are family. And it's true. Chris can attest. I've had some tough times in my own personal life here at IST, and you are family. So thank the administration, faculty, and staff, and then I go to the students who are sitting out there. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here, right? We wear different hats as we move around in our lives, and the students that I've interfaced with in the classroom, learning, when you stand up here, as several of you here have done, it invigorates you. It's like, oh my gosh, they really need to know this, right? And then it becomes fun. And so I hope I share that with the students. I certainly feel it. But some of the students that are here have also worn other hats. Jack is here, and he's one of my learning assistants for several semesters. And he gets to go behind the scenes. He gets to go behind the curtain, so to speak, and all of a sudden realize, wow, you guys really do a lot of work. It's not just standing up in a classroom. And so the different hats that the students wear are important to me, and I thank them as well. So let's get started and see how I do on this. Why did I come to IST? Jim Thomas, first dean, said, academia speak ain't the same as corporate speak, and you've been out 3 decades with IBM, you know that. So your job, Jan, is to make our customers, corporate partners, government, salivate at our product, which is our graduates. That's your job. So engaged with Deloitte, started the dining etiquette for here in IST, talked with Joe Atkinson. He came to IST in the very beginning, didn't know much about our school. He then became on our board, and he gave a case study of risk management in one of my classes. I won a grant from the state, Ben Franklin, Stay Invent the Future, again, engaging corporate relationships. And that one was kind of interesting in that our students, I made a deal with all the startup little companies here in State College and said, will you take one of my students? They'll get paid $12. You pay $6, and my grant will pay $6. Now for $6 an hour, you know they jump at it. So that was one of the things I did. Now have this Scholars for Service, and that was a grant that I wrote that is still going on, and that is allowing our students to get their last 2 years of undergrad. There's some grad slots there as well, and they get free ride for 2 years. They even get paid stipends, and then they owe the government to work for the government, not for free, but to work for the government that many service years. And lastly, Department of Defense, their Defense Threat Reduction. I manage that program with postdocs. So, Dean Thomas. I did engage our fellow folks. But what I'm most proud of is how we engage, and this is part of our teaching techniques. IST, when I was interviewing different colleges, I wanted to come here because they wanted real-world applications. And those of us that have been out in the real world, we know it counts to have that experience. And so when I first came, I worked with Lockheed Martin, and they called me and said, Jan, I will give you $20,000 if you would have one of your classes do a criminal justice program project. So imagine I write this fake $20,000 check. I'm walking up and down the hallway of borrowed space because we didn't have this building. And I said to the 10 professors that were hired at that point, who wants 20 grand? And you know, every office was full, but their head was down. They were still developing their courses because at that point we only had freshmen and sophomore. But at the end of the hallway was Dave Hall. He says, what's the problem, Jan? I said, nobody wants $20,000. He said, really? And thus we co-taught a project management class and under special topics, and had 4 different applications with the local police department. Our sergeant, the technical sergeant, was our sponsor. And so those 4 applications was implementing corporate real world case studies. The amusing ending of that story was, as the sergeant came in as our sponsor to do pulse checks at the very end, she said to the 4 teams, we would like your applications to go live. we would like you to ride in the police car on second shift. And their eyes got really big. And the ones in the back of the classroom, there was one dear fellow, he said, "You mean I get to ride in the front seat this time?" And without skipping a beat, she says, "Yes, but I take your social security number." So again, I think what sets us apart is crafting real-world projects. Okay, it's a turn on to the student. I'm a very effort-driven professor. If you go to rate my professor, you will see all things. I make them work too hard. My LAs know they work very, very hard for the hours they put in. But again, it's real-world things that we're doing with our students. And several of them, one of my project management classes, IBM was doing a project with them. And at the very end, they come to hear the final presentations, and one of the student teams did a solution of a project, and the IBMer said, and he had 500 people working for him, so he wasn't, just a recent grad from IST. He said, "Would you like the name of the real client for that project?" And the student team looked at him and said, yeah, we would. And he said, "Your solution is good enough that I'd like to share it with the client." And I was like, oh my goodness. Of course, Joe Lambert and I had to sit down and talk, unless you could listen a little bit. It was okay, there was no liability, we were very careful. Okay, so what I want to show you are different techniques, or what I call secret weapons, to keep the students engaged. We have a curtain here, you and I. What goes on behind the curtain, students don't know about. What goes on stage? And so that's kind of how I'd like to pose a lot of this. First thing I do in classes that are resident classes is I mix the teams. There's great discussion in academia about how we divide teams. How do you put different people on different teams? And so I did a very low stakes Myers-Briggs, psychogeometrics, okay? Are you a circle, squiggly, triangle, or square? So nobody's threatened, nobody's intimidated. I'm not an introvert, I'm an extrovert. Don't have to go there, right? So it's very low stakes. So they all take this 5 minutes. I was going to have you do it, but now they charge for it, so we're not doing it. And I had all the circles in the corner, triangles in the corner, rectangles, squigglies, squares in the middle. Divide them all up and said, okay, one of you, one of you, one of you, one of you, one of you. You're now a team. So what that automatically does is make opposites have to work together. They have different priorities, they have different values, they have a different sense of deadlines, and they hate each other. You talk about the 4 stages with team forming, right? They're in storming about second class, right? They are angry at each other, they don't understand why you think that way, but at the very end, they're now performing. And so what a good fodder for an interview, right? How did you handle that slacker? So we do the psychogeometric test. Behind the scenes. And Jack, it's free for you to holler out any time to help me out, or tell them, that's true, amen, or no, that's not really right. My learning assistants, okay? They are part of me, all right? They are part of my team. And what I do is I divide my students into teams, and then each learning assistant owns a community. So Jack has teams 5 through 8 this semester. He owns those students. Another LA will own teams 1 through 2, or 1 and 2, another 1 and 3 and 4. And so what that allows is a great deal of personalization. All right? They know the students, and we meet every week. And so that way the student feels cared for. All right, somebody's in the military and has a problem. Somebody's home, has a child in the hospital. We can keep tabs on that much more easily. And then, George, Margaret, and my mom. Would you hold up what's in front of you? Show them. These are tent cards. When I was at IBM, that's what you saw on a conference, right? Everybody walks in, they have their name in the front, big, because my eyes aren't so good, big. So they have the name, and it's facing me, all right, as standing up here. Why would I do that? What's in it? Come on, talk to me. It's okay. They're to get to know the kids. So I can call on Dave, and I can call on Margaret, and when I have 150 in a class, do you think that's important to the student? Absolutely. When I have guest speakers come in, they can call by name, right? It's an excitement, it's a motivation for the student. On the back of their cards are dates, little squares. They are to initial every time they come in. They pick up their tent card. They initial that they were there. Now, at the end of the semester, their real temptation is to initial all those cut classes, right? But LAs, what do you do, Jack? The end?
Well, I'm an online class.
Right. So, sorry, that's true. Residents, my LAs collect them at the end and X out that day if you didn't initial it. So there's no temptation. Participation's important. Okay. So this slide is relative to face-to-face large cybratorium classrooms. How do we engage them? First thing I do is I do a jump start. First 5 minutes of class starting at the minute. You see, I worked for IBM and started at 7:42 and left at 4:12, all right, as a college graduate. So they're not used to time being as precise as I would like them to be. So the first 5 minutes of the class, I tell them neat, quick tricks to jumpstart their corporate career. Not related at all to the class. All right, you want to come? It's okay. You don't want to come? Okay. Participation, we talked about. It's not just butt and seat, so to speak. It's not just checking off that box. And so in the residence classes, I would have my teams sitting in order. Teams 1 and 2, 3 and 4, et cetera, et cetera. My LAs are sitting near them, and the LA will typically sit in front of that team, and they have an Excel spreadsheet open, and every time you raise your hand, right or wrong answer, you get credit. You get credit for participating. And so it's a very easy way then to have the students, low risk, talk to me. It's not fun standing up here for 90 minutes, just me talking to you. You talk to me, right? So participation, and by the way, in the large cybratorium, I will have my learning assistants roam around the aisles. So in case you're sidetracked somewhere, they just very quietly stand behind that student. No words needed until he changes or she changes. Okay, we're hearing here, down with homework. When I first started, I was very sensitive to how I would be evaluated. Coming from a corporate company environment versus a student environment, I didn't know how hard or easy to be. I really didn't know what the expectations were. And so I went into Dean Thomas and I said, okay, what do you think? And he said, well, just do what you think is right, but challenge them. And so I did. And so in the blogs and the various rate my professors, the word out in the street was, she gives too much busy homework. So of course I'm hurt. I think it's all important. And so what I did the next semester is I walked in and I said, okay. And I put it up there. I said, that's what people are saying. Have you heard that? And they're all not looking at me, right? They're not looking at me. And I said, okay, here's the deal. This semester, you don't have to do any of my assignments. And they clean their ear, make sure. I said, that's right. No assignment, as long as you can turn in a reason that you will never, ever need it. Not one did. So, clickers. David Test at the university started the clicker opportunity. I did that here along with, I think, Rosalie. We were one of the first classes that did that in the cybratorium. Super way. Homework's assigned before I talk about it. You're in college. I don't need to read the book to you. All right? I expect you to come in with your homework done, having read the chapter. You will have a quiz on it that day that I lecture. I give real-world examples, but what I do is before I go over in content that I feel is important, we do a clicker test. And it shows, if you're not familiar with that, I would ask a question about content that I'm about to talk about. And if they score right, like 75% or more, I move on, okay? I give them the real-world example, but I move on. I have too much content to share with them to bore them. And so clickers were pretty cool. Another technique I used in the large cybratorium was a thing called roll on down. So I taught Monday and Wednesday, for example, new chapter. Every Monday I would have a sign up on the overhead saying roll on down to remind them, because it's Monday for all of us. And so first teams would go back a row, the back row would come down. So everyone got a chance to be this close to me, right? It turned out that they were sad to leave the first row, which is really kind of cool, isn't it? You'd think they'd want to hide in the back. But at that point, it was a way to mentally, physically come close to them and look at them in the eye instead of way up there. And then I did a thing called Jeopardy. In the textbook that I was using for the project management class, there was a Jeopardy, and the Jeopardy questions were very similar to their quiz that was upcoming that same period. So, front row got to play Jeopardy. The winning team got to get a 95 for the in-class activity that the rest of the students were doing. 95. Some of them wanted 100, so they didn't care. They played it, but they did the homework, the in-class assignment anyway. The other team had to do it outside of class. I found that the people in the back, instead of doing the in-class team activity, were listening because they wanted to cram for the quiz. And they did the in-class activity before midnight that night. Insight's another technique. In the large cybratorium, it was under a different software name. But what it was the ability for me to show what's on John's screen right now up on the overhead. Okay? So students were pretty careful how much they surfed. You only have to do it once or twice. You tell them ahead of time that that's what you can do. All right, LA Scope. They own their own team. By the way, I don't know if you know the algorithm for the way they randomly generate teams in Angel. But the honors students, Schreiers, get to sign up first, and when the random generator runs, it's typically those students who are teams 1 and 2. So if there's a new LA coming to me to work with me, I will give them teams 1 and 2 because they then have, generically speaking, students who are more motivated. Office hours, each of my LAs have an office hour within the last 4 days of the week before the deadline. Each of them, we sit together and we decide, I want first shift coverage, I want second shift coverage, this is for the online environment, and I want weekend coverage. So between all of them, they'll do that. Both they and I do 10-minute recordings, pulling out PowerPoints from the chapter's content for that week that are important to them. They may not use a slide that they don't have personal validation of why this content is important. Manage protocols. I have a hidden Excel file for each of them. I give them a template. And I have on one of the worksheets, I'm running time, I saw my wave. Missed assignments, we have a whole worksheet on that. I'm told that my mannerism is a velvet hammer. Okay? Deadlines are deadlines. But if you have a good reason, that's the velvet part, right? And we keep track. And any missed assignment, we personally, the LA goes out to that student, said Professor Jan and I met and we were disappointed, blah, blah, blah. Closing is how can we help, all right, in the online environment. Emails, it's very hard to filter out which student belongs to which team, to which LA. So my students are trained in the beginning, every subject line has to begin with their team number and their name. That way, when they send it to the entire faculty, each LA that owns that particular team knows they get to answer it. So it's a way to filter. New LAs, for the first 2 weeks you BCC me, I want you to make sure you're setting the same tone, atmosphere that I choose to share with the students. Discussion boards is probably the only thing that's really different here than what I've observed with others, and that is I have 2 deadlines. In a week, you put an original post, student, you do that 48 hours before the end of the week. Because I find last minute they're all doing it the very last day, and then what's the word discussion all about? You're just posting, right? So 48 hours before, and you will lose points if you don't do it by that time. Say it was Thursday midnight, you had to do your original post. My learning assistants, within the next 12 hours, they've already locked it out on their calendar, they will reply to each of their own students. Again, that personal touch, right? Not just other students replying to them, and I do randomly. Okay, scenes, weekly meetings. We listen to each other. We open up their grading hidden Excel file. We go over grades. I have very detailed rubrics, take off a point here, 2 points here for these reasons so I can ensure consistency. And they can bring up to me, hey, I think this is a better way, or this really is too many points. And so we keep working it. That detail is not apparent to the student. All right, that's just how I choose to make that happen. And within 48 hours, the students have their grades. That's my commitment. All right, within 48 hours, the more detailed comments I give them, the less white noise back and forth of emails. Why did I lose a point for this? All right. So on to a new thing that I'm doing. I filled out a COIL survey for the university on online teachers and asked about me. And I called up the COIL folks about a month or two after and said, so how'd we do? What was the finding? Help me with my direction. How can I be a better online teacher? And so Larry Reagan sat with me and he talked to me about what the findings were and blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, I want to do something in the classroom with my own students. How do they want me to customize how I deliver to them? How do I customize my teaching behaviors? And so Larry, the COIL group, gave me a survey, optional for my students. So in the fall, I piloted it. Now, of course, I have a suspicious sample size, right? It's my students who want a good grade. So when I say optional survey, you know, okay, I think I better do this. In the first 2 weeks of class, they fill it out. So, of course, my response rate is really good, all right? But I've done it 3 semesters. I've got over 100 responses. I created action steps for each one of these teaching behaviors. There's 35 of them. I categorized them. I analyzed the data, finding, and I was just recently at the eLearn International Conference. They do it every year, last week, and I presented this process. And if any of you want to know more, because I know time is still ticking, certainly, I can share with you what I'm doing. It's an ongoing effort. Analyze the findings, but if you wanted to walk away from how can I, as a professor, as an instructor for online, how can I just find out which of the 35 are the most important? I got it. There's the top 5 out of 3 years, and I can show you those. The most valued teaching behaviors. Once they send me if they fill out the survey, I customize an email back to each student saying, you thought teaching behavior number 2 was important. Let me tell you what I'm going to do, because I think that will embrace this teaching behavior. And by the way, do you have any other ideas of how I could do that? Do pulse check. Also, I have my LA. I told you I work my LA. Jack's sitting there smiling. She does. They also sent out an email. These are my actions, my next steps to show you that I'm embracing the teaching behavior you value. Then we do a pulse check. How are we doing? My next step is self-directed learning styles. It's another research area that the World Campus instructional designers are looking at. The students evaluate and they say what they're weakest in. And I also include in my email how we could help them in that. And we have to word it very carefully. Weak behavior. Of course, we don't say weak, because I get bristled students emailing back, I think I'm really good in motivation. What do you mean that was a weak skill of mine? And my answer is it's weaker than the others that you were great at. Doesn't mean that it's weak, it's relative. Okay, so we don't have to go through all this. This is just what I said. Okay, so here are some of the categories of teaching behaviors. Flexibility in the online course. Content, required. Notice required over the 3 shapes is almost non-existent. Teaching behaviors I've grouped into what is required of me teaching in the online environment. The only explanation I can think of right now is that it's required. They wouldn't be in my course unless they had already met those requirements. So that teaching behavior is almost non-existent. The golden nugget, the one that is most liked in all 3 semesters, is interaction. My teaching behavior, how I interact with them, how my LAs interact with them. So over the 3 semesters, the most valuable teaching behaviors, these are just numbers of the teaching behavior questions, but here they are. Here are the top 5 of what a student wants from me as an online teacher. Clear grading, no surprise. No surprise, right? Returns graded assignments within 7 days. I'm doing that within 48 hours, right? Their weekly deadline, 48 hours from now, my LAs and I will have met virtually, we'll have graded the assignments, and we'll have posted them to Angel. Another thing that's important to them, and these are prioritized in the order, and those numbers are the teaching behaviors, and the paren bracket italicized are the categories that I had shown you. Creates a learning environment that is respectful of all students. You understand our demographics are very different in online. The last time I checked, 50% of my students were the typical high school grads, realize now I need a college degree. I'm teaching 110, intro course. 25% of my students, it's now decreasing, but as of 2008, 25% of my students were downsized, outsized C-suite folks. CEOs, CFOs, CIOs, CTOs, you name it. They were executives and now they don't have a job and they don't know about the online environment. When they went to school, it wasn't wireless. So trying to put all of those people, and the other 25% that I left out, he's excused, he already told me, I believe. The other 25% are active soldiers on our war front. Sorry, I couldn't get my homework turned in, it was blackout, next of kin haven't been notified. Now put those 3 people together into a team and have them do a video technology project online. Think about the discussion boards. People ask me, do you like face-to-face resident or do you like online? Okay, the experience that those discussion boards, the students bring to there are pretty different, all right, than those who haven't been out in the real world. Presents in an understandable manner, all right? Points out places where the students present opposing perspectives or conflicting opinions. Those are the 5 of the 35 that the university researchers say are important for we online instructors to deliver. These, from my anecdotal 3-semester data, that's what it shows. So in the research, the folks over at World Campus doing this study wanted to talk to my learning assistants because they were a piece of this puzzle, right? They reached out, they talked to my students, they have their online office hours, and so here are the important ones. Communication, we already heard that, didn't we? Communication, it was interesting. One of the questions I asked my potential learning assistants is, have you ever had to tell, because they're all undergrads, have you ever had to tell an adult he's doing it wrong? Have you ever had to confront an adult? All right? And what they were saying in the communication is they felt very comfortable, and the students that were in that sector, they also felt pretty comfortable. Discussions, presence in the discussions, thus we have my allies answering the original post within 12 hours after the student's deadline. Accessibility, all right, we have virtual office hours posted. I tell the students you have 4 hours every week of synchronous, live, talking one-on-one to my team. That's pretty good. 4 hours. Different shifts, weekends, weekdays, we're accessible. Teamwork skills. I have a protocol where I found that it's best when I hear about a slacker to always include the whole team. I'm not going to play ping pong back and forth between team member A and team member B and he said, she said. I pull you all together in that email, right? I ask them first to work as a team to try to solve it. If they can't do that, include Jack's involved right now with a particular team 8, and he's working with that team and certainly informs me, but from the team's point of view, and most importantly, the slacker who I want to save, from his point of view, or her point of view, she's able to save face with me, the one who gives the grade, right? I haven't been involved yet from their perspective. And so I get a better solution rate, right, of changing those slackers. In progress reports, we do a video project, we divide it into 6 deliverables. Okay, anecdotal results from this teaching behavior customization to the students, right? Student says, okay, I can't believe you're reaching out. I can't believe you care, right? This is above and beyond the course content. And from the COIL themselves, they're happy I'm doing it. It's anecdotal, it's real world application of what they're thinking is important. let's keep learning and sharing. Thank you.
Okay, we have plenty of time for some discussion and questions, and the way that's going to work is I'll let Jan call, and then I will rush back to you with a microphone. Here I go.
Okay, participation point.
Participation, Jack.
Okay, whoever's
Jack,
got him as a student.
Write it down.
Yeah, you get a point, do it.
So Jan,
Yeah.
now having gone from
Take this off.
classroom
Yes.
and then going online, what skill sets or what techniques rather, what teaching behaviors would you, that weren't present when you were doing in a residence, would you bring into the resident classroom? That you
Oh, to
had
bring back?
Yeah, to bring back. that You
Interesting.
had to develop,
Interesting.
modify, and then
Yeah.
you realize that maybe, you know what, I could have been doing this the whole time. in
Yeah, okay. So that's more directed to the benefit of those that are still doing the face-to-face resident. Yeah, and I think the first one that the LAs had pointed out on that 5 rectangle chart is communication. Okay, I think that when a student knows you, the professor, cares, you got him, her. If I care about you and I'm willing to do one-on-one with you. So how do you do that in John's class of 140 students in the project management class, cyber term? How do you be personal, right? I would give a lot more ownership to my learning assistants than I had before. I've observed, we all observe each other, right, annually, or at least we used to. And I've been in classrooms where the learning assistants are attendance takers. Okay, I don't pay them for that, or IST doesn't pay them. I don't use my allotted money, all right, for them to take attendance, all right? So I empower my learning assistants. They are my right arm. They are my right arm. That would be my takeaway.
Good, thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, Dave.
This is kind of a leading question.
Okay.
But that's okay. The first time I taught online, I actually taught the same course online and in residence.
Yes.
And one of the things I found was, unfortunately, I thought I have a great personality, but the online students actually did better than the resident students. And in part, it was because they are
The
working
profile.
professionals and so on.
Right. Student
But you learn a lot from that, and I just wondered if you had had a similar experience where you've taught the same course online and in residence, if
I have.
not simultaneously, at least sequentially.
Yeah. I have, and I haven't gotten over the hurdle, and like I said up here, I'm always interested in learning. So if anyone comes across a way to have an online student engage in a corporate project more easily than is apparent to me, I would love to know that. When I do the resident 140 students, I got corporations wanting to come in because it's a junior class. They're recruiting. They want the summer internship, so they're motivated to give me time. I love the turn-on that I see in the student when they say, you mean I really get to work with Deloitte or Price Waterhouse or IBM? You know, real people that could hire me, right? They're going to work extra for me. So the same 302 project management class, teaching it online versus resident, I can't yet figure out how to make an online experience work like that. They are professionals, so the threshold is much easier to reach because they're more motivated. They've been out in the workforce. They know the money they can make when they learn this content. So yes, so I've had experience in a global supply chain MBA program teaching project management, and I have engaged corporate partners, and they Skype, okay? Okay. It just, I can't get them to sink their teeth in as much, right? So talk to me if anybody knows. I'm still looking at that. Anybody else? Yes, George.
How adaptable are the techniques that you're using to different courses? For example, you're talking about project management courses. What about mathematical courses, or programming courses, and so on? How adaptable do you find this, and have you done that?
100% is my answer. I taught the ethics course here, Human Diversity 341, and I engaged corporate partners. All right, so that's really different than project management or technology. I engaged faculty internationally, Spain, Argentina, France, I had somebody from China, Thailand, all right, and I got grad students there to be the end user for my students designing any website they thought would be important to that country. So now I think I've kind of spanned the different types of courses. If you, the math, the sciences are, for me, pretty easy. I go to a corporate partner and say, this is what you're doing in the real world. Wouldn't you like one of my hot students to come work for you forever? Right? This is how you do it. So I'm okay with those. It's the softer sciences that are a little bit tougher. But I think corporate, I mean, that's why I came to ISTU's, real world application. That's what we espouse. We say, our students will leave, number one, knowing how to work in teams. They've done it for 4 years. They know how to deal with a slacker. Maybe they know how to recover from being a slacker, right? And they also know real-world experience. If you were hiring, I think that would be of importance. Anyone else? No? Well, I'd like to thank you all again. Every one of you in your seat, I'm thanking you because this is why I'm here. Really honored to get the award and appreciate your contributions to making my life pretty exciting.
All right, let's thank Jan. And she'll stick around for a few more minutes.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to chat with her.
Yeah.
And please enjoy refreshments. And Cindy would like to make sure everybody signs the sheet. If you did not yet sign the sheet, make sure you sign the sheet.